welcome back to another episode of Just a Squirrel looking for a nut, trying to get out of this rut.
You got now. You just you and me. What's going on? I think there's some more people around here. Come on.
Yes, one or two.
Who are these people? Ah, there he is. Like you can't always be the best looking guy in the house. Casey Burma, welcome to the Squirrels.
So great to be here as always. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It is so good to have you. Now, let's just talk about one of my favorite. He's an inspiration of mine.
Casey?
Casey. We'll talk about Casey. I'm going to talk a lot about Casey today. He is an inspiration of mine, but he's not this particular inspiration. This inspiration's name was Hesiod. Hesiod was a farmer in ancient Greece. His dad had been a seafaring person, but due to poverty, he abandoned being a person that navigated the ocean and moved to this rocky backwoods in the middle of Greece, back in the middle of nowhere. The land was awful. It was near a mountaintop. That was the only place where he could scrape together enough money to start a little farm. And so Dad and his two sons became farmers, and they grew crops and they also kept animals. And Hesiod was a shepherd sometimes. That was one of his responsibilities as a teenager. And he went up to the mountaintop one day. It was near the farm. And he was feeding his flock and watching them eat. And Lachelle, America's supermom, just walked into the house. Now, Lachelle, you were not in ancient Greece watching this shepherd tend his flock and feed him on a mountaintop. And neither did you, James Kunkel, but I do want to welcome you both to the show as we talk a little bit more about the story of Hesiod. Like I mentioned a minute ago, Hesiod the shepherd was out there tending a farm or tending his sheep on a mountaintop. And all of a sudden there was a flash of lightning. And 9 goddesses appeared on that mountaintop. These 9 goddesses were the muses. They were the goddesses that inspired arts, creativity, science. And they turned to that shepherd Hesiod and they gave him a gift. That gift was eloquence. Later on, Hesiod and his brother's father died. The father split the farm up between his 2 sons. Hesiod was a hard-working, virtuous man, but his brother Perses was not. And his brother Perses wanted all of Hesiod's inheritance. So he went and bribed some local judges so that they could conspire to bring lawsuits against Hesiod and take away everything he had. And Hesiod wanted to spread a message that this was wrong, that the way to be prosperous and succeed in this world is by working hard and living an ethical life. And so he started to grab lead tablets and little stone chippers and write down poetry about this, because that's how they wrote at the time. He didn't have any training. He was nobody. He was just some farmer's son, a shepherd in the middle of Greece. But those stone tablets, once he was done etching them, became a book, a poem called Works and Days. And Works and Days changed the face of Greek religion. It's studied by thousands of people. It has defied categorization. Because of the gift of eloquence that Hesiod believed he was given by the muses, and this passionate epic poem called Works and Days. Hesiod's voice was heard not only all around Greece as a professional epic poet, but around the world for thousands of years. His voice, the voice of a nobody farmer who was about to lose it all, found its freedom. Are you, Casey, or you, Oleg, inspired by Hesiod? Lachelle, James, anyone else? Do you think that you, if faced with similar circumstances, could take the gift of the muses and find your freedom?
Mm. Man, Scott Mason came out firing today off the bat. Like it was one of those moments where I could sense that this is a story you've been holding in for this particular moment, and this was the perfect opportunity. No,
My voice found its
straight
freedom.
into it. We're bypassing what we're talking about today. We're going straight to the point.
Answer my question.
I feel inspired. I feel inspired by people who are able to use their voice. I think one of the beauties that I've learned about the world in general through my own travel of experience in different cultures is in US this concept of freedom of opinion. And I think being able to express to a degree what it is that you want and actually have the ability to be heard. I think that's a huge component of freedom as well. I think it's one thing to be able to say things, but I think it's a whole other thing for those things to be heard. Now, for me, when I think about this concept and I think about the story that you just shared, Scott, it has taken me many years to develop my own sense of independence or freedom when it comes to my voice. I think part of it has to do with from my early childhood days, I didn't have the opportunity to express how I felt and what I believed I knew. And I think because of that, in my teenage years, those things followed me. And it wasn't until maybe 8 to 10 years ago that I really started to use my voice, and I started to use it in a way that can also help other people use theirs, create opportunities for them as well. So, how does a voice find freedom? I think for me, in looking at that question and looking at the story that you just shared, the first thing that comes to mind is practice. The more that I begin to use it, the more confidence I gained in that voice. And through that confidence, then I was able to find some of these other elements: courage, the ability to connect with other people. I think there's so many different ways that voice can gain freedom. I don't think the spoken word is the only one. I've met plenty of people who only write. You rarely hear them speak, and yet their voice has tremendous power, tremendous influence, and a sense of freedom and independence.
Well, you think about that. No one
Mm.
hears Hesiod's voice today. We only
Mm.
have what was written by him. And he only, by the way, wrote these poems because he had no access. There were formal schools in cities like Athens that trained people in the techniques of memorization so that you could become an epic poet. He actually wrote these things on stone tablets because that was his improvised way of memorizing things. He didn't know any better. But it's interesting that you say that because about practice.
Mm.
Because what he did, as I just mentioned, was etch these things out on lead tablets as a way to practice. Now, if it were me, I could just see what would happen. I would be etching away on those doggone stone tablets, get to the last sentence, and then realize I made a mistake and have to start all over again. And then I'd be like Moses coming down from the mountain, smashing that damn tablet all over the place. And he didn't give up. Works and Days and his other major work, Theogony, these are epics of huge magnitude. Casey, have you ever wanted to just give up having your voice be free? Have you ever said, I don't want to practice anymore. I just want to be done. I just want my Oscar. Do I have to rehearse on it? You're muted.
Your voice is muted.
Free your voice, Berman.
Free your voice.
Many times just want to give up the practice. I think, voice, like you were saying, Scott, voice does not need to be something audible or verbal. Voice is written. And I think when you talk about Hesiod, what's interesting is the courage he needed to stand up to his brother in the story. And, really to make this point around how to live life. And so I think when we talk about the word, how does your voice find freedom? The idea of how do your voice find freedom, or how do you express your voice? I think what we're really saying is, how do you express courage? And courage is the idea of, you could look at it in many ways. You could look at it as not succumbing to fear. You could look at courage as looking at the world and being open to questioning it. But I think for me, how does your voice find freedom? Freedom from what? Freedom from something that's holding us down and restricting us. So the way I do it is, some of it takes time, some of it is just building that confidence. But what I really equate the voice here is with that courage, and courage can take practice. Courage can take time. And so for me, what really coming out here is that having that, a lack of care, being moved away from fear, but really that courage to move forward, to be your true self, to not be boxed in, all of those things. Because I think that's what Hesiod did. I think he was his true self as
Hmm.
he etched out this poem with his ideas of how he wanted his life.
There are 5 roles that I've identified in Greek mythology
Mm.
that can be toxic. They occur over and over, and I think they symbolize certain personality types. And one is very germane here, but I'll go through them all. First, there's the monster. Second, there's the villain. Third, there's the victim. Fourth, there's the bystander. And fifth, and most relevant to this conversation, is the fool. Now, I am not referring to the fool archetype that a lot of times you hear about, which is as a trickster or someone who is a jester who is actually making fun of the power structure and serves as a social outlet.
Mm.
I'm talking about the fool in a mythological context that has a very specific meaning. An example is King Midas. King Midas judged a music contest between the god Apollo, who was the god of music, and this skanky little satyr, who was a half man, half goat beast named Marsyas. And King Midas, and everyone knows if you're just some half man, half goat living in a wilderness somewhere, your music ain't going to be better than the god of music. But when asked to judge, King Midas voted against the Olympian deity. Now, the satyr was filleted. Didn't end up well. But Apollo turned Midas's ears into those of an ass. He was the ruler of a Turkish empire. And by the way, if you're ever in Turkey, you can see his tomb to this day in a city called Hierapolis. But in any event, and I visited it myself, but in any event, he wrapped his head in all of these kaftans or these hats and these turbans and things like that that made him look suave. But his barber knew the truth. And his barber hated Midas because Midas presented as this wealthy, fancy, awesome, all-powerful person, but was, as this episode with Apollo indicated, an idiot. He was a fool. And the barber knew that if he told anyone Midas's secret, he'd probably get executed. So what he did was he dug a hole by a river and whispered the truth into the ground, just to get it out. But the reeds, the plants, hated King Midas too. And they whispered the story everywhere. And before long, Midas, the arrogant, hyper-stylish, image-oriented, boastful, braggartly, apparently courageous, bold, opulent, fearless individual, wasn't even afraid of the god Apollo, was exposed as a fool. So when I talk about fools in the context of courage and what you just said, Casey, how do you know when you're throwing your voice out there isn't an act of courage, but it's you really being a fool?
So that's a great question. And how I would answer that, and how I try to assess pretty much every action in my life, and that's difficult to do every second. You can get too analytical, but I think in our mind, not our brain, but in our mind, there are two teachers. There is the connection with whatever, whether it's God or nature or spirit or what's right-minded. And then there's what we call the ego, what you call the playing in the matrix. There's a lot of other ways to view it. The fear monger. And so Midas there, when you'd have to look at the intention. But for me, I know it's true courage when I'm listening to the voice, to the teacher, to the viewpoint of the right-mindedness, the authenticity. And that's when it's coming from love. That's when it's coming from confidence. That's when it's coming from kindness. I tell my children all the time, I said, I really just want you to be kind. And my daughter said, well, she needles a friend of hers in this scouts group she's in. And we talked it through, and the needling and the pushing is actually a right in a way, because that's what the relationship is built on, and that's at a certain point of, but where is that authenticity? When you're not being authentic, when you're doing it for money, when you're doing it for bravado, when you're doing it for image, when you're doing it to push buttons. And while some of those we all do, I think that was the teacher that Midas listened to, and Midas did not listen to kind, authentic love, or confidence. It was actually a very seemingly insecure move on his part.
Welcome to the show, by the way, Carl Sean Watkins. I do want to acknowledge this is your first time here, and thank you for saying hello to us. Oleg, what do you have to say about this?
One thing I wanted to build off of what Casey just said, as far as knowing what the truth is, something that I've started to realize in the recent months is I believe, in my opinion, I believe everyone knows what the right thing is. I think for one
serial
reason,
killers,
to them, according to the lens, I mean, I'm not saying that the right thing is necessarily something that everyone has to agree with. I think it's more so. I think there is. It's I don't know how to explain this. It's a feeling within the heart. It's some sort of alignment with, as Casey had mentioned, God or universe or energy, whatever it might be. I genuinely believe everyone knows what the right thing is. It's whether or not they choose to do it. That's a completely different story. So
I agree with that. I agree. They know it's wrong, but they do it for attention, in my opinion, for attention. I mean, when you think about why, and I've read reports of psychologists who've gone to death row and spoken with them. The serial killers are either so mentally ill or are so devoid of anything in their life. There's a phrase I heard, which I live by, which is that an action, anything, is either love, confidence, connection, kindness, all of that, or it's a call for love. And that's it. And they know it's wrong, and they're screaming for love. Being Jewish, there was a phrase about Hitler, can you love Hitler? And what I would say is yes. And I would want to go back to Hitler as a boy who grew up under an alcoholic father, I think a mentally ill father, alcoholic mother, or vice versa.
It was totally abused.
Totally abused mentally. I don't know physically, but I'm sure mentally and emotionally. The cluster, that he grew up in as a child. And of course I have to give that person love. Of course I can. And it's interesting. There's a football player, the Washington Commanders, the Washington DC, the new football team, and I think he wrote, Hitler, great military strategist, and I'd want to, of all the people, he's one of the top people I'd want to meet for dinner. And all these people, many of them Jewish, got offended by it. Are you kidding me? I'd love to meet Hitler for dinner. I'd love to ask. Now, granted, I want him handcuffed so he doesn't take me away, right? Or send his people after me. Like, I do want to get out of dinner alive, but are you kidding me? Meet Hitler? Talk to him? Like, it'd be absolutely phenomenal to get into the mind. I think a lot of our hypotheses would be proven, and a lot we'd be surprised, I know. But I think, to your point, I agree 100% with Oleg that I think we all know what's right or wrong. It's really just that voice that we listen to.
I'm going to argue hard with you all.
Please.
I'm going to say that some people don't know. I think that's hubristic of us to assume that everyone knows what's really right. In the case of psychopaths, they may not have a moral compass at all. The parts of the brain that govern morality, ethics may simply not be developed. When you see brain scans of psychopaths, sometimes there are entire areas of the front part of the brain that are just dark, where there are neurons lighting up left and right with more neurotypical people. And so is it really fair to say that they know what's right if the brain parts that are governing that aren't even active? That's number one. Number two, who are any of us to sit and say who's right or wrong? I actually have some thoughts about that. But I would say that, for instance, the 9/11 hijackers thought that what they were doing was so right that they were going to be rewarded with these virgins or whatever it was in heaven and paradise afterwards. I'd also argue, by the way, that the Stoics have an interesting perspective on this that's worth pursuing, which is that some people actually, and they encourage people to manage anger and rage based on it, which is understanding that if people are acting in a way that is antisocial or outside of the bounds of reason, to understand that those people are either out of control of what's governing mechanisms there, or lack the wisdom to behave in a way that shows right or wrong. That they simply don't have the ability, the wisdom, or the moral center to be able to figure out what's wrong. And I throw the Stoics out there because that is a philosophical system that has truly stood the test of time. And no one has really, they might have little critiques about it here or there, but no one has been able to sit up and truly defeat it as an ethical paradigm, which is why it's still around.
So do you believe there is a universal right or wrong then?
It is interesting. There is the best answer, and I don't pretend to be an expert in this, and I want to hear you all fight with me on this, but I would argue that the one paradigm which works for me so far, and I may be challenged on it and change my mind tomorrow, is the idea of moral progressivism. According to moral progressivism, there is a ladder. That ladder takes us from the least social or the most antisocial to the highest social. The lowest rung on that ladder is when your ethical choices or decisions are based on what's good for you, and that's all that you can conceptualize. The middle rung is when it's you and your guild. In other words, those in your family or your immediate identity community. And the highest level is when you're talking about and addressing every stakeholder that is impacted by your actions. That perhaps, but some people are not at that level. They're not even able to imagine themselves as part of a larger community of stakeholders, or their own imagination limits them. The Stoics, interestingly enough, also sometimes say that a huge ethical lapse is in forgetting to consider, or perhaps not even really being able to think about who and what you are. Dr. Doreen, welcome to the show. We want to hear your comments.
And
yes, well, I want to be on your podcast.
I want to.
DM us. Consider that accepted. Thank you. So now, Casey, why y'all need to start arguing with me? Come on.
We'll let you go.
So I think I don't know. I personally I would challenge that point that there is a universal right or wrong. I mean, the only reason why I say that is because in my opinion, what I choose to believe in is I believe that everything is relative. So, you can bring up the point of, okay, well, is murder right or wrong? I mean, we're doing it, right? It's happening right now. Like, yes, it may not be considered right to kill a human being, but we slaughter animals. We kill other living things. So in regard to that, I think it questions, it puts that theory into question. So I think the only reason why I believe it's all relative is because that's how I choose to view the world, and that's why I believe that everyone knows what the right thing is according to their lens. Now, you and I may look at the same exact thing and have two different perspectives of right, and I suppose, let's say, in order for the society to work, there has to be some sort of common ground. Like we can't both look at the same exact action and say, okay, yours is right and I think this is right, and have completely opposing views. I think that there probably has to be some level of commonality between the two of us, but I do believe, I don't know, I haven't found any examples of universal right or wrong. What I have found is more so the relative terms. Like, you may perceive something as right, and I might perceive something as wrong, I suppose, or vice versa.
Well, telling me I am one hot suspender wearing man, that's a universal right. Casey, right?
According to your
ain't
universe.
that true? No, according to everyone's lens.
You know?
So there are universal rights and wrongs, and that's because we've created them. The only reason, for example, money is of value is because we believe in it. That's it. And the only reason a $5 bill is worth more than a $1 bill is because we agree that 5, the symbol of 5, which really isn't 5, it's a symbol of 5. In the same way, my words 5 aren't 5. It's a symbol of 5, and 5 is just a concept. What really, right? But that dollar bill with the 5 on it gets more for you than the same piece of paper, linen, than that with a 1. So there are universal truths. You don't kill, the 10 commandments. We see it. All right. There were 464,000 global intentional homicides in 2017. I just looked it up. There are 7 billion people. That is a 0.000062%. I mean, there were so few people intentionally killed. All the stuff but I would tell you, probably 99% of all TV shows are about intentional homicide, but globally,
wow,
dude, and that's 2017. I mean, no one commits murder. People just aren't killed. But so now, why is this, right? So we've got these rules. To answer your question, yes, we have universal rules. Now, you've got the universe of Republicans, you got the universe of Democrats, you got the universe of San Francisco Giant fans, you got the universe of vegans, you got the universe of smug, self-righteous San Francisco liberals. I live in the city. I can say that.
Is that why you're moving?
Right? So you've got all these universes
under attack today,
right? You got universe of vaxxers and non-vaxxers, vaxxers who do it for political reasons, non-vaxxers who do it for health. I mean, all these universes, and they all, they all got their little rules, which are universal. But then we've got our universal rules across the globe, right? And we can suss them out. So I think there are. The thing is, there's that joke which you talk about all the time. There's 2 fish and they're swimming. So I think it's a Zen story. And an older fish is coming the other way and says to him, "Hey, fish, how you doing? How's the water today?" And one of the younger one looks to the other younger one and says, "What's water?" Okay. We are so in what one psychologist called mother culture here. We're so immersed in it, whether it's Earth global, whether it's San Francisco, whether it's New York, whether it's whatever it is. We're so immersed in this water, this culture. We don't even know it. We don't even know it. We don't know what we don't know. And so we've got these truths in here. For me, what we don't realize is the capital U universe is beyond even the Big Bang. And that is that there's this idea that we feel separated. We feel very anxious. We feel that everyone, I mean, look how anxious we are about murder, right? And there's such a slight chance you're going to be murdered in this world, particularly in today's day and age. So for me, I think there's universal. We've made them up, that the American dollar is more reliable than the Zimbabwean currency, just because we have more faith in the American government, right? But there are more broader universal truths that go beyond, we can't even comprehend it. I mean, this is God, this is metaphysics. Our little minds don't even comprehend it. But the best way that I can even get even a start on that is to go back to my point about fear or love. And if I can, throughout my day-to-day in this matrix, in this universe, lowercase u, make a choice where I don't go with fear, which is gossiping and talking smack or even beating myself up, but I go with love, which is, it's all going to be good. I have enough time to get that work done. I'm not going to be embarrassed on this podcast. Scott's gonna like me, right?
I love
That's
you.
I know. That's that one small step that we can do. I mean, look, Dr. Downing just invited us, called us leaders of thought. I mean, this is wow, it's beautiful. Like I'm so great, right? So that is the way, and I think we need a universalism that is kind of beyond what we think is the universe. The tough thing is our minds have difficulty comprehending it.
Mhm. You know, one other thing that I wanted to share in regard to all of this, and maybe somehow tied to what you just mentioned, Casey, and that's the ability to express one's thought or the ability to use one's voice. I remember, and I might have shared this story with both of you, but whoever's tuning in, this might be your first time. I remember when I first landed in Ghana, I shared with the two of you how one of the first feelings I had stepping off the plane was this feeling of feeling like a minority, feeling like I'm out of place, feeling like I don't fit in, and primarily because of the fact that majority of my life, having been to different parts of the world, I felt like I'm majority because I was able to relate easily to people surrounding me, all due to the color of one's skin and many other factors. But this time it was different. This time it was different. I was the only white person or Caucasian within probably many, many miles. And I realized in that moment that I had to dig deeper in trying to understand how do I use my voice to make myself belong in this space. And there was something that a friend of mine had shared with me, and that is he mentioned this cultural tip that people in Ghana love to be greeted. So it's true. If you walk down the street, you'll see each and every single one of them use their voice to um, help one another, uplift, empower, help them see differently. You know, you could feel it. Like when someone says good morning, they don't just say morning. Like they'll actually like express themselves like, hey, good morning. You know, how are you? Good afternoon. Good evening. It's almost like a tone that carries with it. And so I realized in that moment, like I had a choice. Like I could be completely culture shocked and not use my voice and be so overwhelmed with all the different changes that were introduced into my world, or I could choose to speak up. I could choose to be kind. I could choose to be loving. And yes, things were different on many different levels. But at the same time, what I realized through that experience and many others is the number of times that I chose to shy away from opportunities due to difference, due to a difference in environment, due to difference of a group, due to a difference of whatever it might be. And though, so that's where I suppressed my voice. That's where I didn't choose to use it.
And
That
you know what's crazy about you, Oleg, is that
Mhm.
difference was an illusion from your mind because you looked
Exactly.
out.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I started to do is once I was able to zoom out, I was able to see a larger perspective that, okay, yes, so what that I might be the only one of this particular skin color within whatever radius, right? Does it mean that I still can't connect with the people surrounding me? Does it mean that everyone's after me? Does it mean that all these different things? So, what I'm trying to get to is I think part of that freedom, and I know we spoke about this. Yes, there is an element of courage. I think there's an element of boldness, but I think there's an element of making a choice of either I'm going to be kind or I'm going to love the people surrounding me, regardless of what it is. I'll give you another example. I'm in Philadelphia right now, and I had to walk to the Apple store this afternoon. One of my friends, he said, "Walk down this street." I wouldn't walk down that way, so I walked down that way. So what, right? Like, yeah, don't get me wrong. There are some whatever fears, situations to stay away from, but I personally am beginning to believe this more and more. Is that I do believe that to a degree, I create my own circumstances. You know, I've walked through rough parts of Detroit. I've been in Flint, Michigan. I've walked through rough parts of New York, Philadelphia, you name it. And yeah, I think there's certain times of the day I might have been in danger, but I think even walking through some of the crowds how I chose to react to people there, it made all the difference. So I think your voice does have tremendous power. I think words do matter. And I know for me, it's taken me a long time to understand that. And there were many times where I didn't understand that. I didn't think that my words mattered. I didn't think that I had a voice. And I didn't think that my voice can actually create my own reality.
Yeah.
I'm going to shift the topic a little bit and take on that conversation about, for instance, voice and how we interact and what subconscious messages we're sending out and where and all that sort of stuff. Because one thing that I feel like is being downplayed a little bit in this conversation is the vagrancies of luck. Fortuna.
How do you define that?
Wow.
So let's
circumstance
first,
that's beyond your control. Here's an example of the vagrancies of luck. So, my sister lived in an apartment building in a dangerous area of the city that I grew up in. And why do I say it's dangerous? Not because of circumstances or because of mindset or because she's not nice to people. It's because there are actual crime data statistics that are collected there. And a vagrancy of luck was that there was a gunfight that occurred in a parking lot not that far away from where she lived. And a bullet that was fired from one of those guns didn't hit anyone that was in the gunfight, but happened to go through the window of a nearby apartment building and landed right in the face of a girl who was innocently ironing her clothes inside her house, and she lost her face. So, was she just walking around creating circumstances? Was how she was interacting with people affecting whether that was dangerous or not? Was she creating her reality or not? Let's not underplay luck. She could have been the most positive, open, wonderful person that she was, but she was ironing with her window open on a hot summer night in the wrong place at the wrong time, and fortune took away her face. Let's keep it real, people. Fortune and luck is a lot of this stuff. Luck is where you're born. Luck is that you're a male of a certain height. Luck is that you have certain intellectual and emotional dispositions that enabled you to get out of Russia that other people might not have had, and that you didn't have addictive tendencies that might have cost you a life of drug addiction or tragedy, or that you happen to live in an era where you had access to technology and you happen to have the money to it, and you happen to have the ability within yourself to be creative. That sort of stuff is luck. And so do you feel, as I often do, that we discount the role of fortune, circumstance in these things that we're talking about? Because I think that plays a lot into it.
So I personally, I can't say I share the same view as you do, Scott. I don't believe in luck. Let me put it to you that way.
So you think that was just how would you explain what happened to this girl?
I don't think I would have an explanation. I think there are certain things that are not meant to be explained. I think that also, going to your story, there is your perception, and there could be a perception of someone else of what took place. You may only know a small glimpse into that girl's life. You may only know the fact that she was ironing, bullet went through the window, and boom. You don't know what she might have done. I mean, or I don't know. I'm not saying that like she deserved it by any means or anything, but I'm just saying that there's so many other events that could have led to that point. It reminds me of what's the movie called with Matt Damon? Adjustment Bureau. A series of events that they go through that lead to another event, and essentially, if they go this way, then they're going to go through X number of events.
What about slavery? You were born in the South in 1843. And you were African American. That's luck. That's luck of birth, bad luck. Or you were born white, the child of a plantation owner, and you inherited free labor. That's luck. You can't just say that was, we don't know the circumstances. This stuff is well documented.
So is it luck, or is it the actions of people before you? Is it due to the actions of your parents or grandparents?
Well, you being born into that circumstance is something that you have no power over as an infant, right? So that's luck. What they did, of course, with their own life may or may not. I think that that's true. We can't necessarily say.
Mm.
But I don't know. I don't know about y'all, you people. Well, I didn't choose my parents.
But I
didn't
guess
choose my
Scott,
economic circumstances when I was 0.6 years old.
But is that luck, or is that just what it is? What it is? Like, is that one of those things where it doesn't even have a label?
That's sophistry. It's luck because it's a variation of circumstance that you have no control over. You have bad luck or good luck or neutral luck.
Okay, so you do. So what?
So what? So then I think the issue that I have with this is when we're talking about how does your voice find itself, and saying things like, and I'm not trying to be harsh here. I know I'm being argumentative. Okay. I know I'm being a jerk. That's just your bad luck that you happen to be in the room with me tonight while I'm going off. But let's keep it real. We have limited control over our ability to assert our voice. We say we have all this control, but I'm saying we are overestimating our will. Will is part of it, but maybe will is 10%. Luck is only is a lot.
Well, when you think about control, you think about luck. Where it's coming through a lens. I think it's right. So for me, when you think about kindness or acting in a certain way, what all of this perpetuates for us, is our identity. If we're very kind, and if we all come from love in this consciousness, if Hitler didn't need to do what he did, if the 9/11 hijackers didn't feel compelled to do what they did to make that statement and get revenge, if the American and Western colonial powers didn't need to go take the oil from the Middle East and carve up those kingdoms, there's an identity that the world has, an identity. Nobody wants to be a nobody. We all have names. We all want to align with something. The issue is we are all going to be happiest when we're nobody, when we're back. I mean, John Lennon, Bob Marley, Disney movies, we're all one. I mean, it's right in front of us. Marcus Aurelius, it's right in front of us. But we don't want to listen to this, or we don't want to interpret it. We don't even want to dig deeper, because it means we're going to lose our special identity as Casey, as Californian, as American, as whatever. And because if I give up my identity as Casey, then what am I? I'm the ether. I'm the Big Bang. I mean, what am I? So for me, luck and finding my voice, I think it's a good question to ask, but just realize the more we all find our individual voices, the more separated we perpetuate. And I know we all have a story. I know diversity is key. I know we all need to make amends for past times. I mean, look at all those Jewish people who did not like, I think, Allen, he's a linebacker for the Washington Commanders. How dare you offend me with that Hitler comment that I thought was interesting. But we all need to be offended. We need it, because if we're offended, if we're wronged, that perpetuates us as individuals or as collective or so on. So the girl who got shot, well, that's a horrible story in our universe, to die in this world. But you know what? Why do we celebrate birth? Why are babies so cute and old people so bad? Is this world where, Oleg, like you said, we slaughter animals? I mean, is this world really fantastic? Is it? I don't know. I mean, look who's won. Do you know what the most populous species are? Humans, chickens, cows, and wheat. They've won. There are more of those living things besides insects on the world than anything else. Their lives are horrible, though. You ever seen a chicken's life? There's more than they won by numbers, but it's horrible. So what I'm saying is, I think when I hear that story about the girl who died, it is horrible. It sucks, Scott. That's horrible luck in this matrix of the world that we're in. You're right. I mean, that it like, what if that happened to my daughter? I mean, I don't even know what I would do. But in the bigger scheme of things, is death so bad?
I had a discussion with my husband about this just last night. And he was actually making that point. I was doggone mad because I was like, hey, isn't your life awesome because I'm in it? He wasn't advocating for suicide or anything like that. He was just like basically saying, making a comment that, death and all this, the world is not this perfect place. And it's not rose-colored lenses and Skittles and all that sort of stuff. People get sometimes a little bit over infatuated with how wonderful it is. And I think he was critiquing toxic positivity, and he's right on the other side there, so he may vocalize his disagreement, and you might hear this voice waft. Someone might find their voice on this show. If you don't know where it's coming from, it's him correcting me. But that was kind of his point last night. We got into an argument, and then I turned my back on and went to bed without even looking back.
Well, and you got angry at his point because why?
Because I want him to love the world because I'm in it.
But I also wonder, in case you brought up a really good point, and I even wrote this down, just in case if we get the point. It happens from time to time. So first is, I think you don't get to choose how you die, right? And you don't get to choose when it happens. So what I get curious is, if that's true, let's say that's one of the universal truths, then why do we assign meaning that this way of dying is bad and this way of dying is good?
Pain.
What? But what? Okay, that's a fair point. But even in that case, it's like assigning, to the story that you shared. Yes, to me, it sounds horrible way to die.
She didn't die, by the way. She has to live the rest of her life without a face.
Okay.
And I say that intentionally because death is extreme and all that, right? But think about this.
Yeah.
This is someone living without a face. That's, to me, worse than death.
Well, it's horrible. It's horrible. No, it's horrible. In our world, it's absolutely horrendous. It's absolutely horrible. I hope that her reality is now dictated not by an external bullet or an external a mortified face, a deformed face, but rather is by how she feels, how she projects internally. I know that's very hard, but if I really look at this as a lesson. If I keep looking to the external world for what I need and to define my identity, that's going to happen to me literally or figuratively.
Yeah. And
so for her sake, I hope she has the strength and the power to not, I'm not going to say not get it down. I don't want to sound flippant. I'm trying to choose the best words, and words are linear ways of communicating, symbolic ways of communicating, which never get the right point. But I'm hoping this horrendous episode has contributed to her hopefully being at a level of peace, at a level of peace right now. That's what I would wish on her. And I'm not trying to be condescending. I'm trying to say that I just hope that this deformity enables her to be at peace.
Do you think? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, you go.
Do you all think, though, that the whole question of how does your voice find freedom is reflective of privilege? That we have privilege even asking that question. Just as I'll challenge you back on this very respectfully, Casey, we have the privilege of saying that we hope this for this poor woman because we've never experienced anything, and hopefully never will, remotely like that.
No. And I don't want you to push that on me. The whole, hey, you white guy talking about this other
I'm not pushing you because I'm saying that as a person with a face.
Yeah. So my take is I don't think it's we're at privilege, whether we have a face or the color of our skin or so on. I mean, there's definitely white privilege. There's definitely a lot of privilege that are in this
yeah, but make no mistake, I was not accusing anyone. I'm coming from
you called me a racist. You called me a racist. I'm just joking. Yeah. No, I come from privilege. What else am I going to say? What else? Here she is. Yeah. And the channel, the gate, the doorway to other human beings has been eradicated for her.
Mhm.
Her face is gone.
Mhm.
She can't wink at anyone. She can't see them. They don't see her. I mean, it's gone.
Mhm.
Her doorway to the world is gone in many, to the external world.
Mhm.
Like a blind person, I can only hope for her that there's a level of peace, a
Mhm.
level of quiet, a level of non-anxiety. I don't know if it's because things are quiet, if it's because maybe now that she can't see the world anymore, she doesn't have all the stimuli that we deal with and stresses us out. I mean, maybe ironically, with her senses being impaired in this way, she literally takes in less and is calmer. I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm just throwing ideas out.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
hope it's something like that. So while we all bemoan and literally and have pity on her, I hope she's kind of going to the proverbial mental bank and running to the bank and saying, I pulled one over on these folks. I'm so calm.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
world is so quiet now and everyone leaves me alone. I don't have to iron anymore. I've never ironed another day in my life. Now I'm
No one
having a
will
little
ever
fun
ask me
here,
to iron again, ever.
right? I don't
No, but
know.
it's
And I'm
true. It's a good point.
I'm trying to be supportive with a
Mhm.
little bit of humor, but I I hope she's finding some level of peace in this incident.
What one thing I want to build off of, not to diverge completely from the story, but more so what Casey just mentioned, and that's the role that the external world has, as well as the opinions of others in finding one's own freedom when it comes to that voice. I think this is for me is a perfect example of it. I don't know how many topics we've covered, but we've covered quite a few. And starting from this concept of death, right? I think one thing that I'm starting to realize is due to change, which is happening at every given moment, in my opinion, I think for me, it has become increasingly difficult to find spaces where I can agree to disagree.
Why?
I think because of, I don't know, and this is something I've been trying to better understand, and maybe because the world is seen a lot more as black and white rather than gray. I mean, this whole concept of death, right? One, like the conversation we just had, like, okay, this way of dying is bad, this way of dying is good. Why does it have to be that way? Like, why can't it just be accepted as a cycle? You were born and you die. You don't get to choose how you were born. You don't get to choose how you die. So and that's where I think um, it becomes tricky for me. It's become tricky to find that freedom at times. I mean, what I don't know if you guys want to go this route or anyone else that's joining vaccines, right? I've seen the conversations around vaccines change relationships. I've seen the conversation around vaccines change families. Will they ever go back to how it was? I don't know, to be honest. Now, a lot of that has to do with one's freedom to express the decision that they made. One person chose to get it, the other person chose not to get it. Who's right and who's wrong? I don't know. And I'm not going to try and be the judge of that. But what I will say is that from personal experience, and I've seen this in having one voice be louder than the other, it does take away certain freedom from the other person's voice. So I think, yeah, and Elise mentioned the same exact thing. Same with politics, it changed families. So that I think there is a fine line, and that this is why Casey, you're one of the people, and you too, Scott, as well as many others I look up to when it comes to this, because I think there is a fine line between how much one chooses to rely on the outside world to let the outside world define your voice, and then stick to your own truth, take your opinion. Like, yes, your opinion might change, my truth might evolve, but I still have to have this space to be able to express that.
You know, freedom comes from, there's a number of ways where it comes from, but German frei,
Mm.
or the Indo-European, which comes from friend or love.
Mhm.
And then liberty, independence, comes from a different root, meaning, or so they found, where it literally comes from this idea of, you know, not being tied down, independence. So it's a little bit different. But when we talk about freedom, you know, how does your voice find freedom, to the point where this goes back to how I think, and it's not even I, but how I'm trying to think. And I'm trying to think this way because my mind is so small. My mind is so stuck in the water, in the mother culture. I am so enlightened. I mean, there's so much we don't see. I don't see, but I kind of hang my hat on love. And again, not to sound like some woo-woo California, San Francisco, touchy-feely, all of that, but love as for sport, you know, in the zone, confidence, motivation, inspiration, ambition, you know, kindness, connectedness, alignment. That is love. You know, then you've got fear, which is everything else: anxiety, lack of self-worth, shame, guilt, all of that. And so for me, when I think of how does your voice find freedom, if we go back hundreds of years, if not thousands, to where this FERR, or I word came from, it's about love. And there's this notion of love, going home to family, going home to where you belong, obviously, which is the opposite of where you don't belong.
Mm.
I'm not with my mom. I'm not with my family. I'm not with loved ones. I'm not with the known. So for me, how does your voice find freedom? I think we all want to express ourselves. We all need to have our voice. We all need to get our word out there. I think for me, the less I say, the less I sort of have my voice. And I think the more that I just choose what's really right, which is that we're all one and there's nothing to be afraid of. I think that's really how we will all find freedom. Unfortunately, the reason we don't do this, and I'll end here, the reason we don't find freedom, the reason we don't go to love, the reason we don't do what John Lennon said or Bob Marley said or that some of the Disney's movies said, is because if we all became one, we would give up our identity. We would give up our causes. We would give up, here's the thing, we would give up our angst. We'd have to stop being victims. Again, this one linebacker from the Washington Commanders says something about Hitler, and everyone looks at it like, yes, subconsciously, I get to express anger because that helps me be my identity of who I am. And I can only imagine this guy like, whoa, I was just doing a Twitter poll, right? Like, I don't think he has an unkind, racist, anti-Semitic bone in his body, right? I really do believe he was shocked at the anger that was caused. My point is, when I saw it, I said, all of these people, this collective consciousness, need something to get riled up about. I need something to get riled up about. That's why I have the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's why I play the game. I play the game, right? And I don't like University of Alabama. I'm so happy Georgia beat them. Alabama's been winning too much. You know.
So divisive.
I observe it. I'm like, I'm getting angry now.
Yeah, now you're expressing your anger.
Elise says this is such an important conversation. Thank you, Elise. That's absolutely what we try to do, and I appreciate you being part of it. Please continue to contribute because we want to hear your voice. We want to give your voice freedom within this forum. It's interesting, Casey, that you mentioned that the word freedom comes from frei. I want to analyze that. Frei. Now, in common popular word, there was an alternative spelling of that word, Freyr, which was the name of the Norse god of fertility and light. But his actual, if you go to Norway and if you look at, you know, totally the way that at least I was raised knowing that god's name without the R is Frey. And he had a sister, Freya, who was the goddess of love. And Friday, by the way, is named after this god, Frey and his sister Freya. Frey, as the god of fertility, light, and love, symbolized abundance. And in fact, if he were to disappear, the whole world would probably be covered in darkness and cold. Now, I mention that because what you're talking about, freedom, coming from that word, Casey, is abundance. Abundance, I might add, with regards to our identity. Our identity is so abundant, if we're truly confident in it, that we are literally willing to share it to the point of diffusion. And so perhaps part of our psychological limitation is embedded in what you're saying, that we believe by being one, we are actually we're giving up something when really we would be gaining something. And I will say I never thought about it that way. If I were both Oleg and you, yeah, I would lose the unique Scottness.
Yeah.
But I would also gain everything that you all bring that's so unique. And by the way, going back to the theme of Stoicism, Stoicism generally promotes behavior which is pro-social. In other words, pro-connection versus antisocial. As a matter of fact, the word Stoic comes from the Greek word for porch, which is where, just like in your grandma's house, people would gather and socialize. So it is interesting. How does our voice find freedom? Perhaps an answer to that is by truly giving up or being willing to let our voice lose its uniqueness. The only problem is I don't know if I'm ever going to be prepared to do that, because one of the challenges I had growing up was that I wasn't allowed to have my uniqueness. I was always subsumed within the identity of another. It didn't feel good.
And I would never want the world to be devoid of Scott's uniqueness. Seriously. The way I would say you do it is it comes to, let me say this. It's how does Scott's uniqueness, Oleg's uniqueness, Casey's uniqueness, Miles Davis's uniqueness, my kid's uniqueness.
As Elise Crap would say, Donna Summer's uniqueness. I saw that comment about disco, Elise. Mwah. Okay, Kate.
Exactly. How so that uniqueness and the collective love and togetherness is not mutually exclusive.
How can that be? How can it be?
Right. How does all of our uniqueness, it either contributes to separation. I'm better than you are. I'm going to blow up your buildings. I'm going to steal your oil because I need it. I have a narrative. Or it comes to a realization that we're all one and we all have these gifts. That's what I think. And I think, unfortunately, when we think of our identity, we all go separation. We all go think of the no pain, no gain. Got to get yours. Early bird gets the worm. I mean, these are all things that we've been taught since day one. One thing is row, row your boat. Life is but a dream. We don't bring that up as much as I would like us to. So I'm in this game. I'm in the matrix. I'm a player here. Casey Berman. I got CaseyBerman.com. I'm getting headshots done. I got my identity, but I also got a foot outside of the matrix. I straddle it or try to, and know that at the same time I'm playing the game, I'm observing it. That's why in Hinduism, Maya is a drama. We look at the world as we look at it very mechanical. True Hindus look at it as a drama, but we're the audience and we're the method actor.
What's the connection between freedom and responsibility when it comes to this question? Is there a connection?
You're asking a couple of lawyers that? Oh, like, are you sure you want to walk down that road with the two of us?
No, I'm serious. Like, is there a connection between
Casey,
responsibility and freedom?
I'll just go off, and the world doesn't need me to do that. It needs some of that Casey passion, but controlled
freedom. Discourse. Yeah, thank you, Scott. I'd love to see you go off. If you got what the question is, essentially, how does freedom and responsibility play?
Yeah.
Well,
what is the responsibility in having that freedom?
Well, if freedom is love, what do you need to be responsible for? I think I don't view freedom as don't tread on me,
Mm,
to quote our revolutionary literature writers. I don't want to view freedom as your. I think this is one of the main issues, particularly with a small business owner, when we
mm,
charge money. That if I charge money, I'm taking something away from my customers.
mm.
No, I mean that is one of the main reasons why so many businesses fail is we don't want to charge money. Oleg,
Yeah.
you have a very big thing that just happened to you, and you
Mm,
felt confident in the price you charged, and
And you
they're
got it.
happy to pay it.
mm,
So when and I may be reading too much into your comments, push back, please. But when we say what responsibility do I have for freedom,
mm,
not much. Freedom's about love. Freedom's about kindness and generosity. Freedom's about being best to myself and being best to others and realizing this is all a dream. I got a foot outside the matrix.
Are you
But while I'm
saying?
here,
Are you saying, therefore, Casey, that true freedom is pro-social, and that antisocial behavior is not true freedom?
well, so antisocial behavior. So I don't look at the effect. I don't look at the effect. I want to look at the cause. So if you
But
have
the cause may be antisocial if you're driven by your own desires above and beyond those of those around you.
it could be, but if you take a non-neurotypical person like my son, who has had antisocial behavior, bumping into kids in first grade and doing, they look at it like, why'd you knock that down?
Mm-hmm.
And what we've realized is his brain was on fire. There was a gluten allergy. There was just, like you said, the synapses didn't connect in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way he even had the courage to approach other groups of people was to barge in.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at it like, what are you doing? You just knocked everything down. That's antisocial. That's the effect. The cause was from him in his mind was, I want to belong, which is freedom. I want love. I want to belong somehow. Now, luckily for neurotypical people, we know how to do it. We read social cues. We take a pause, a breath. We break in. Hi, nice to meet you when you have a moment. For non-neurotypical people who don't do that, they don't have that muscle. So when we say, and I think the justice system is a lot of it's after the law, but not the justice, because we're after the effect. What happened? Well, he bumped in and he did this and he did that. I'm not saying we let everyone out of jail. No. But what I am saying is, what's the cause of this? What's the cause? Now, we can't go in their mind, unfortunately. And we don't trust them when they say, I was just trying to belong. We don't trust them. Because there's too many people. When you get beyond 150 people or so, you don't remember names. You don't trust people. That's why we have credit reports. That's why we have escrow companies, because we don't trust each other. We can't. We don't know. There are too many of us. Blockchain is trying to solve that, which I like, but that's a whole different story. So when it comes to pro-social or non-social, you're right. There is pro-social and there is non-social. I can tell you, my son did some non-social behavior, but I know what the cause of it was, because he would come home crying saying, why don't I have friends? Daddy, I don't understand.
By the way, his neurodiverse, the words aren't coming out right, but his membership in a neurodiverse population is a matter of luck. He didn't just control that.
But also the viewpoint, how his mind works in ways that I see, he won't be the high school quarterback captain, but what he'll do in the world and how his mind works. And that is one of the beauties of the world now, where I see is that there is that acceptance for not only based on race and not only based on gender, which obviously has a lot more to go, but we're seeing more and more, but is based in, which is what is so beautiful about what you do and what you do here at the Squirrel and what the sponsors do.
What we do, because you're in it with us. By the way, Oleg, let's talk for a few minutes. Where is a place where people who are looking to find out more about the power of a voice Where's the place that they can go?
For me, it's through a place called Overcoming Odds. And that's the website's on the bottom, called overcomingodds.today. And this is a space where people can learn more about different ways to form their own narratives that they believe in and they like, and explore some of these questions that we've explored today around fear, love.
I've got to say, too, it is a truly unique experience. Anyone who hasn't had the chance to listen to an episode really should. There's no other podcast like it anywhere.
Maybe besides Purpose Highway.
Maybe.
Let's go to Purpose Highway.
Let's take a trip down the Purpose Highway. Both of you have been there. Purpose Highway is involving conversations with people who are breaking new grounds with regards to purpose, spirituality, and ethics in a world where technological, cultural, and other changes are accelerating at a pace beyond what we can imagine. Now, I'm going to share something with y'all. There are only a few more episodes left. And then I will be moving on to a different podcast, and I cannot wait to share that with you. But those podcast episodes are going to remain. We are soon going to be having an episode featuring a former NASA astrophysicist who's now a dream interpreter, who will be talking about the nature of human consciousness and the very fabric of the cosmos itself. Wow. Mind-blowing stuff. In the meantime, follow me on LinkedIn, follow Oleg on LinkedIn, follow Casey on LinkedIn. On my LinkedIn, you can find out a lot about how mythology speaks as to personal transformation and business. Casey, what will people find if they look up you, and where can they go to do that?
Leave law behind is what I focus on, and I help unhappy attorneys to transition out of the law and find a non-law alternative career they love, and that they're good at, that has meaning to them and pays them well. So that is my focus.
I like the new name, go.leavelawbehind.com. I like the brand. I like the brand behind it.
It's really powerful. Now, we have a sponsor of this show who I love talking about. I don't know about you two, but it's an amazing company. It is named Spectrum Design, and it is a t-shirt and apparel printing company that also does embroidery on apparel. They employ mostly people on the autistic spectrum, and they provide true, meaningful career path jobs to a section of the population that faces up to 90% unemployment. The CEO, Patrick Bardsley of that company, has been a guest on this podcast, as well as on the Purpose Highway podcast and the Overcoming Odds podcast. And the company does quality work. In fact, you can see an example of it on the body of the most handsome guy in the room outside of Casey Berman. Yo, Oleg, looking good today.
I know.
How can we find out a little bit more about Spectrum Design, Oleg?
Right here.